Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 549. I'm your host, Lauren Gray. Thank you so much for joining us on what down in South Florida is a cool Friday. But thank you as everyone comes online for around the world. 209 countries we broadcast in live, in addition to our simulcast on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube channels on a variety of association platforms and corporate relationships. And of course, LinkedIn on the profile of me, Lauren Gray. So, and also watching us on Twitch, and as always on our TV channel, the Hospitality Channel, which you can get on your smart TVs. Roku, Google, Amazon, Apple, all of the main casting characters. We're on all of that. Just look for the Hospitality Channel. So, with that conversation today, we are just rolling into February. It is the early part of February, first week of, or closing of the first week of, there is. And we're kind of flush with what's happened with January for some destinations. For, as we said, we're in a K economy, so there's certain components of our market that are doing quite well, surprisingly well. January is kind of a rebirth month. People get their fresh, new, shiny budgets. They have things that they're wanting to do that they couldn't get done until they got their new budgets. There's new strategies that they were going to roll out coming the new year. So January is always a good start of month when it comes to that. While their success is always in question, this month has proved out to be very good for those that have the market segment that has the finances at their disposal to take advantage of. So with that, I want to talk a little bit more about the actual definitions of success, the things that we have to use to calculate how well we're doing with what we're doing. Now, obviously, the easiest and the fastest is gross revenue, just as our number, as big as we wanted it to be. At the end of the day, that is our ultimate measuring stick, is the actual amount of generated revenue that our efforts and everything associated with them, from operations and everything else, has cumulatively put together to be successful. Did we do revenue-wise as good as we wanted to, or better, or perhaps potentially less? With that being said, we begin to descend into some of the priorities. Most people would then first pick ROI as being the next one, return on investment, which is how much did we spend to get that much revenue? And that gets where it gets into some very fragmented perspectives, because if you look at specific ROI based on the production of a channel of opportunities, say just paid campaigns or organic web direct traffic, or your OTAs, or your meta search, or your walk-ins, or your group business, then ROI is calculated to the cause and effect relationship within that particular channel. How much money do we spend in that channel that derived as much revenue that channel provided? And that's a measuring stick. Did the channel provide and live up to the expectations of what the return on investment was for that particular channel? But as we've talked about in many shows past, return on investment is sometimes too myopic in the sense of its first person perspective of value. This is how much I spent exactly on this, and what exactly did that produce, can be very tainted because we are not taking into the magical world of attribution. What was this influencing factor? How much did it help other channels? It in itself did not create the direct ROI that we would find successful. Okay. And for those that might not understand ROI's calculation of value, ROI is calculated against net, meaning if I cover all my costs of doing business, that includes the spend I do for marketing and everything else, then there is a margin percentage, net operating profit, that have how much was left out of that dollar, for every dollar percentage-wise, metaphorically. And that percentage is usually the factor associated with ROI. If I'm spending marketing dollars, I want it to be reflective of the representation of what my net profit would be. So if I run a 10% net profit, okay, before EBITDA, earnings before tax, income, depreciation, amortization, I know I'm talking accounting stuff at this point, then that means that the margin of cost to produce the business did not deter negatively against the cost of running the business. So my expense in marketing it falls within the margin of my profitability of it. Because all the other expenses, labor and associated products and overhead, fixed overhead, and so forth and so on, are costs of business that are what the money has to be spent on. The cost of marketing is the amount of money that has to be spent in generating it. So usually ROI is a great factor. calculated towards your net profit percentage. And that number is usually what tries to balance act the success of your marketing. Sorry, sidebar to describe more of the ROI perspective. But as mentioned before, ROI, direct channel ROI, sometimes cannot be the best accuracy because the attribution of that channel goes undefined. Looking at, and I say this very specifically as a good example, which has historically been this, has been social media. Social media has always had a very poor direct channel ROI, meaning the amount of revenue that is assigned to that channel, social media, does not produce at that margin that is wanted compared to other channels' success, or wanted in the sense of that calculation I just mentioned related to ROI. And so you have to look at, well, does that mean we stop it? If you just used ROI, the answer would be yes, it's not worth it. It doesn't generate the money that it should. It shouldn't be spent for. But what we miss is its attribution value, that social media is a part of the progressive process that our guests use to discover, educate, and then decide to convert for us. And they don't necessarily do it completely within that channel to give it its ROI value. And so because of that, we have to assign an additional value to it to warrant its continued presence as it augments the other channels. We know that social media contributes traffic, targeted quality traffic, to other channels that then convert that interest that was generated in social media to an actual booking. And we, based on attribution, decide that that other channel that was the magical channel that the person actually clicked to book is given credit for that success. So its ROI benefits from the seed or the nascence of what social media had created for it. It's the best example I can give of this attribution value to this. So all of this, we still haven't talked about our topic today. And the topic today is two particular value propositions that include more than just the perspective of what ROI is to the particular channel and the just gross revenue associated with the production of what you've done to generate that revenue. Marketing spends, operational spends, and so forth. And you'll understand more why I'm referring to the operational component a little bit more today than others. So our topic today is CAC and CLV, realistic calculations for future revenue. Now, I mentioned how we looked at January and the positiveness of it, or the hopeful positives of it for your business that came out strong for the start of the year. That is a retroactive look or forensic look at data, where we try to look at how did we produce that revenue and what were the contributing factors to it, and how did those ratios work out. As I mentioned already once, gross revenue in comparison to gold revenue, KPI, is your first measuring stick. Second would be if you want to look at the ROI, return on investment overall of what it took to do that, and then fragment it down to the individual channels that you were using to generate that revenue, and see if those channels provided the same benchmarking KPIs that you thought the channels were going to produce. But what that does is it allows you to isolate out each channel without truly understanding its value in relationship to all of the collective channels or all the collective means that you have done to derive that business. So CAC, we'll take the first one, is customer acquisition cost. And what this does is, by definition, it represents the total cost of bringing a new customer into your business, new customer, okay? It's more than just your ad spend. It's more than just what your marketing spend is. It also includes expenses to acquire the customers. That would break things down into your marketing expenses, obviously, your sales team salaries. Sales is a derivative of trying to generate business. They're not there flipping rooms and ballrooms and working front desk shifts and doing operational things, in as much as they're out there trying to solicit and engage business, which is inclusive of your group business, obviously. Of course, your advertising costs, which are related to your marketing expenses. Marketing expenses, by the way, is kind of a slush fund of discussion in the sense that it's just not the money you're spending on marketing campaign. Marketing expenses is also associated with paying for what you have to do those things, agency service fees and channel service fees and so forth. Those are marketing expenses in addition to the advertising specific cost of the dollar marketing spend that you have in that particular channel. Promotional activities, things that you're doing, the tchotchkes, the branding, the t-shirts, the flags kind of thing. Again, platform costs, whether it's subscription based, but that's really, your contractual relationships with your internet, your booking engine, your distribution engines, your associations that allow you to get into group business sales markets and so forth. all of that goes towards the calculation of customer acquisition cost. Now, customer acquisition cost is pretty much all of those costs together divided by the number of new customers. Now, I keep referring to new customers because this is really what the purpose of customer acquisition cost is. You're acquiring new customers, new guests. This doesn't take into account your current guests that have loyalty with you, that have a recurring business with you. These are the ones that acquire new business, acquiring new guests, cost of acquisition. Now, in this is where we get a blind spot in most people's perspective of the hustle and bustle of awareness that analytics has given us in many ways. We tend to microcosm our perspective of value of effort, our marketing costs, our ROI, our cost of acquisition, and so forth, myopically into a contained time space of last month, let's say, last quarter, all of last year. It can also look forward as to what it's costing us this year to be, what's our cost of acquisition currently as a running total. But the problem with it is that myopic small frame reference creates a distorted view of value. For instance, if a cost of acquisition was, say, $500 to get a new customer, let's take January's numbers. And you look at everything that you've done in the sense of the costs of what it took to do that, okay? Your total cost of acquisition, the advertising costs, marketing costs, your sales teams, all that kind of stuff, put it all together. And then you divided that to the number of new guests, not guests that have rebooked that were on previous ledgers and so forth. You'd have to know what those different numbers of people are, but all the new guests that you had come in. And let's say that it cost you $500 for a new guest. And they did spend $750 in their stay. You would say, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible. We're way out of line with this cost, because 2/3 of the monies just went to getting them. That doesn't cover any of our operational expenses. Doesn't cover any of our hard costs that money has to get compensated for. That's just way too much money for a guest to acquire a new guest." And from a small single transaction, you are absolutely right. That is nowhere near sustainable. It's spending $1.50 to make $1, or in this case, $1.75 for $1. So it would be one of those where you have to figure out some way that this isn't happening. What they're not calculating is time durability. Okay, the cost of acquisition was that much. Now, I'm not saying it's a good number, by the way, but it was $500 compared to the $750 that the initial purchase was for. But then you have to apply what is the other value associated with time, okay? And that is customer lifetime value. Now, customer lifetime value takes into the equation that person now has repetitive purchases with you. How often and for how long and for how much are the three variables. You can simply assume that a person that spent $750 the first time, should they repeat that process again in whatever time frame next, that would mean that the cost of acquisition was then halved because you didn't spend that much, if any at all, depending upon what your efforts were, to have that guest return again. So that $500 cost of acquisition, the second time the guest comes in and spends the same amount, whenever that is, now goes down to $250. Should they do it again, that gets halved again to $125. Should they do it again, it gets halved down to $60-ish dollars. And so on. Now, obviously, zero spend on return guests is not a reality. There is always a cost for it, but the cost of acquisition for the guest to return, or the cost for retention, actually, is fractional compared to acquisition of a new guest. So you're building a base of guests. Now, not all guests return. Not all guests spend the same amount of money. Not all guests return frequently. So all these create variables of what's calculated as the lifetime value of a guest. You have to look at the historical spend of guests that came with you and then repeat their stays with you. You have to look at the amount of times that happens of course, how much they spend. Those are the three variables that come into calculating the lifetime value of a guest. When you add the time extension, the cost of acquisition turns into a more realistic number perspective because of the frequency that they recur their payments and so forth. That percentage of guests that return from their initial stay can, in effect, dilute mathematically the cost of acquisition, because you can apply that percentage metric of value to the actual cost of acquisition. You shouldn't not know what the hard raw cost of acquisition is. Okay, a cost of acquisition of a customer. Okay, but you should also take with it the idea that if you apply lifetime value, that changes the perspective of the cost. Also, if you take the percentage of your repeat guests that come in, say it's wonderfully 30%, okay, or up, then you can apply that directly to your cost of acquisition, knowing that that dilutes the cost because 30% of those people turn into the lifetime value proposition that you're calculating for lifetime value. So that can dilute the cost of your acquisition to not being such a stark number. Now, obviously 500 to 750 is a terrible number. You look at the total cost of what it takes. Now, to figure out cost of acquisition, you have to look at what it takes to get them. And again, we tend to frame ourselves into a small definition of window that distorts the KPI of cost of acquisition. Because if you're only looking at what you did in the month for the month and the value of what that month represents, then you're not looking into the ability to calculate the durability of the value of the relationship that you had as a customer. You have to realize that it's more than just what you acquired within that month. Also, we know that seasonally, things happen in one particular month of acquisition, purchase. A booking was made in January. But the booking window for what was being offered, as we discussed in last week's show about how airline flights affect the booking windows that you're trying to plan for, how far out you have to make your booking plans for flights influences the booking plans for hotels. And sometimes the more major key events, as we discussed, creates a much earlier booking window. You want to grab it as soon as it's available because that is the only opportunity you're going to get for the inventory to be available because it's in such high demand, like New Orleans, Bourbon Street, Mardi Gras kind of thing, that as soon as it's available, you get it. It's not, you're looking for the opportunity to have to get the revenue. So that booking window could be way far out. So what you see in January is an example of somebody booking maybe for something that's very far out. You're looking at a great ROI of, wow, in January we had all these bookings. But the actualization of those bookings are diluted over the next 6 to 8 months. So now, say in the month for this event that somebody booked for in January, and it's 6 months later, okay? The Mardi Gras example doesn't work too well at that point. Since, not 6 months away from January. You look at what you spent in that month and you're going, my gosh, we're spending this money, but we're not getting anything. And that's because the bookings have compressed your inventory availability. And what you're now booking in the month for that same event, you may not have any inventory availability, or the rate may be restrictive for the very few people that are still in that interest enough and the affordability enough to actually afford what it is that you're asking for at that point. So now your ROI is terrible for that month. If you look at what you're spending and you're not producing within the same month. And you may see that your cost of acquisition is artificially high because the few people that are booking, it costs you a lot of money to get them. So you're making distorted perspectives as to what the value is of your marketing within the month. So creating a time frame that is small when you start looking at lifetime value and customer acquisition value actually distorts the KPIs insights, because you're then not really looking at how well the cost of acquisition or the lifetime value proposition can be used to calculate future booking value. And that's really what they're best suited for, is how can you use customer lifetime value and customer acquisition costs to calculate future revenue? Because that's really the more important aspect of the predictability of the KPIs. This goes from taking your historical data of looking at the dates of future that you're looking for. Say we're looking at this summer. More specifically, we're looking at this August in this summer. And we're saying, okay, we have a goal, a revenue goal, which is our primary KPI first, total gross and top line revenue. And we have a cost of acquisition that we don't want to spend more than $40 on them, because last year's August, it took us $40 to acquire a guest for August of last year. Okay. Well, some other numbers we would like to know is what is our return guest percentage in August? Because every month, every week, every day is variable as to the return guests, as to what drives them to our market. So cumulatively in August of this year, what drives them to our market? What is the residual? So we look at returning business. Okay. Salespeople look at it from the group perspective, what groups are returning business. Transient marketing looks at what is our return business. And that goes to now our discussion of feeder markets. What are the markets that drive the most traffic, or traffic in general? First, we'll take the top amounts, but obviously we'll continue to go through the list. Where is our business coming from? Where are those markets? Where are they coming from? For why? They may be event-driven, holiday-driven. August, not so much any of those. In per se, it's not as if there's a major holiday, but there are event-driven things that happen in August, depending upon your market. And you can hang your hat and say, okay, these weekends or these events drive interest to our market. There's these business events, corporate events, conferences, so forth, that might be driving business. There might be certain group functions that are going on, reunions and fraternals and sororities. Those things, okay, are all the drivers that you look at and say, what is my return business? Once that's calculated, we get a margin of what business more we need to get. Okay, so say, again, theoretically, that you 30% of your business in August will be return business. We already see it on the books for group, or we know it's coming through, or it's pending. And we also know that historically these feeder markets, given the same conditions that prompted them before, will be the same conditions that prompt them again to come back in August with us. So now we have to margin out what is the remaining 70% that we need to chase down. And that's when our customer acquisition costs come in play. Like, okay, what is it going to take for us to do this? So know that for every click that converts, you have 98, 97 people that didn't get that far out of 100. So remember your conversions being 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, whatever, which could be great. Okay. That means that 97, 98 other people out of 100 didn't actually decide to purchase with you. So now you have to calculate, but they clicked. So you have to pay for their click, okay? So how much is it per click? How much volume of people do we need to get the number of people that are going to convert to the numbers that we want? So think of it this way. I need 1,000 people to book the standard 2-day stay, my ADR, whatever. Total revenue is an amount. That amount hits my revenue number. And that fills my 70% gap of new customers that I have to acquire. So I need these 1,000 people. My conversion, let's say, is, let's make it real simple math. It's not good numbers, but it's realistic numbers. So my conversion is 1%. Okay. So I need 100,000 people to see and engage with me. Okay. I need that audience size. And that means I have to pay for 100,000 people to see me. Well, and this is being very agnostic to channels at this point. We're not looking about timelines. We're not looking at channel contributions that contribute to attribution strings. We're just saying, in general, we're going to pick a channel. I need these many people from this channel to see me, to get this many people converting at the amounts that I'm charging for, for ADR and length of stay occupancy averaging, to make the revenue that is my goal. That's the math we're dealing with. So we look at paid and say, well, my cost of clicks average is $1. Okay. So I have to figure out how many clicks I have to pay $1 for before I get one that actually converts for what I want to spend. This creates the budget process, the amount of money associated with this. These are the ways that mathematically you back into how you structure your budgets. So that you have an August budget that says, based on what we knew produced last year, based on what we know we did to get that production, we have to spend this much at these average prices, okay, to generate, to discover, to be exposed to the audience size that will generate the conversions we need to generate the revenue that comes from those conversions. Now, obviously, we have many other variables. One, we either improve our conversion, which reduces our costs, okay? We increase our audience, which improves our odds, okay? Or we find ways to produce more affordably, less cost per click. Other channels that might be more affordable, like direct channel or others. Create higher exposure, less cost. So those are the three levers and buttons that we have to control our budgeting process. Where cost of acquisition comes in is a benchmark to determine how those channels get mixed based on the cost of those channels as they influence the cost of acquisition, because all of that gets piled together. As we said, all of that gets put into a big pile that says, this is how much it costs us to acquire the new customer. And that's divided by the number of new customers we got. And that's how much our cost of acquisition is. Then we say, well, we know there's an amount of these acquisitions that are lifetime, will have lifetime value to this. How do we represent those ones properly? How much do we have to spend to get those people back? Is fractionally smaller than compared to a cost of acquisition of a new guest. It's like a tenth in just general terms to keep a guest than it is to acquire a new one. Can we expand that audience better so we don't have to gather as much new guests to adjust for the ones that we do know we're going to get if we didn't do anything at all? So again, going back to the 30% return guests, 70% new guests, what if we made the return guests able to go up to, say, 35% or 40%? Can we improve upon and spend less money doing so the expansion of our lifetime value guests? Frequency, cost, value. Remember those three modifiers: how often they come back, how much more do they spend, and how long do they continue to come back? If we influence any of those three variables for them for the particular time in August that we're talking about, can we improve that so we diminish the need to spend a larger amount of money to acquire a new guest? In that whole process of discussion, you have your CAC and your CLV, cost of acquisition of a customer, customer lifetime value. Now, how you calculate lifetime values, going back to it in particular, is subject of some debate. For the longest time, it used to be that you would have a lifetime value calculation of 5 years, a frequency of 1.5 over the duration of that time, and cost value of an increase of was it 2 points above inflation? So whatever inflation was plus 2 points. And so you would calculate forward, if a guest stayed for you for a particular amount of money, that they would come back a frequency of at least 1.5 times durably per year over the course of 5 years, increasing their purchase value incrementally over the cost of inflation by 2%. And that would be the math calculation. So if I acquired somebody and they were worth $500 in year one, then they would be worth $750 in year two, upwards. So the lifetime value of the guest might be $40,000. Okay. Less than that, sorry, $15,000. So when we acquire somebody and they get $15,000, that's the lifetime value of them, then we can assign that as to what it takes to maintain them, and also how we can expand that value compared to their customer acquisition value. Like if their acquisition value was $50, wow, it was a really great deal because it only costs us $50 and then $10 or $5 every year after that to keep the relationship going with them. That's how you math these two types of KPIs when it comes to figuring out what they do in relevance to your future forecasting. So taking our example of looking still at August of this year, if I'm looking at my customer acquisition cost as being a fixed number, then I know that in order to attain that 70% margin increase over the 30% that is returning, it's going to cost me, if I need 1,000 people to spend an amount of money, it's going to cost me this much per those 1,000 people. That gives me my gross budget perspective. Okay. And now how do I assign that to the channels that are the most productive at the cost relationship that that channel represents? And most importantly, the percentage that channel represents. A lot of people misunderstand that not every channel can ever just cover the loss of another channel. When we talked about stress testing budgets back in August of last year, when we first started, August being the keynote, into September, we talked about stress testing budgets of like, okay, if I lost this channel's productivity or this channel was producing under par what I expected from it, what other channels could help if I expanded monies I spent to them to compensate for the loss of that channel's production. Well, we do know that channels have a certain ceiling of production capability. And despite your best desires and highest value to a channel, it can't overcompensate for a larger contributing channel past a certain level. Your paid campaigns are a lion's share of your marketing strategy. Your CRM, your emails just can't compensate regardless of how good of a channel they produce. There's just not enough audience and just not enough conversions and not enough generated from that channel to compensate for the entire loss of potentially a paid campaign channel on Google, which is your main workhorse of product discoverability and conversions in your attribution string. So limiting what channel capabilities you have is a key understanding as to how well you can influence your cost impact on acquisitions of new customers and the cost associated with your lifetime value. So with that in mind, as you look at your gross amount of revenue that's possible, the amount of audience the amount of conversions you actually need at the revenue levels that you need the conversion transaction value to be, what channels contribute to that has a large modifier. Most of it will go to the lion's share of the channels that produce historically. I have a wonderful worksheet that I've shared out with our Hospitality Marketing Club members as to calculating your channel contribution relationships and budgets from a historical perspective to forward forecast the value of what the channel needs to produce for your revenue goals. And you quickly see how much the over-reliance of certain channels are, that they over-exceed their capacity to actually perform. There's no way certain channels can produce at the level that they're being asked to produce at a revenue generation point because of the capacity level that they have a limit on, the glass ceiling of how many audiences they have and how much conversion they can generate from it and the frequency of their availability. And I keep referring to CRM as the best visual example that you can't keep pumping emails out every other day thinking they're going to produce at the level they need to compensate for the fact that your Google paid campaign is not producing at the level it should have. So when you look at what it's going to take for your large revenue generation and the amount of conversions necessary to produce that revenue at the transaction value that you've assigned your ADR and length of stay averages to, based upon the source of business, group, and transient, weekend stay versus midweek stay, so forth. When you understand all that and you look at the channel contribution percentages, your next step is look at the channel cost. What is the cost of that channel? Some channels are more expensive than others, obviously. Some channels are very good at exposure, but low in value. Social media is the example we gave earlier in the show today. So you look at those and say, well, I need to acquire these many people, these many conversions. My current conversion value in certain channels are this. I've broken it down into the percentage contributions as to what I expect each channel is going to produce based on its historical conversions and its audience size, its contribution percentages. So now I have that broken down. So from that, how does that calculate against what it's going to cost for me to acquire the new guest? And you basically pool those costs of all the channels together and say, this is what's going to cost me to produce a new customer in August. How does that balance against our historical? Is it high, low, same? And if so, can we modify that? Is there any ways that we can adjust what we're doing? This is when you get into the fine tuning of the channels as to what maybe is a yet to be discovered segment to a channel, a market choice of a channel. And this is when you begin to lean into your lifetime value guests, is to saying, well, how can we assign more value to our lifetime value guests to improve the percentage of contribution that they might be able to provide? Your repeat same year guest returns. Can we expand that audience so that we don't have to spend as much money to acquire a new guest? That's where the customer acquisition cost figure gets balanced to what you calculate in comparison to it, just from the example I just gave, and say, are we good, same, or better, or worse? And what can we do to modify those? It also, in reverse, can give us a benchmark of saying, historically, it cost us this much to acquire a guest. Let's just gross math that and multiply that to the number of conversions that we need, and that gives us a gross budget. How does that compare to what we have forecasted for the year for that month? And see whether or not, again, we're at, above, or below the expected number. These are all checks and balances associated with, are we doing as good, same, or worse than we did last year in acquiring our new guests? Can we improve, maintain, or requiesce based on new variables that we didn't anticipate or didn't have the same of as we did last year? These are the kind of things that are how you balance out these key performance indicators. So I don't want to muddle it up by going over the same territory a few times. I've been told that sometimes I repeat myself on processes that then make it harder to understand than if I just let the one definition stay straight. And I know I probably already created some confusion in some ways about that already. But the idea is these two indicators are key to benchmarking your anticipated costs, anticipated revenues, and also variables on values of efforts with the extension of time. And this goes to a layer deeper than just myopic return on investment perspectives. It gives you a more encompassing view of your overall cost of strategy, inclusive of more costs than just your marketing spend costs. Okay, this includes the cost to actually doing the marketing spend, your service fees, your platform fees, your subscription fees, your channel cost fees. These are all things that get added into, including salaries and cost of departments and so forth, like the sales. That gives you a real true perspective of inclusively saying, this is what it's costing us to generate our top line revenue. Lump sum compared to lump sum. So hopefully that was a helpful way of understanding these two very important KPI calculations in not only calculating a understanding of your previous revenue growth or revenue generation, but also using them for calculating future revenue potentials to them. So thank you again so much for everyone that watches this live on the TV channel in 209 countries. Sincerely appreciate the honest of hours. We do simulcast the show again at 11:30 a.m. Wednesdays, Sydney, Australian time, and London time to cover our APAC friends and our EU and Mideast friends. And we do so very much appreciate those that do watch us and as well back then. It's also on our Hospitality Radio channel, our station, hospitalityradio.com. That's a linear program. It has more than just our show. We have a marketing hour, we have a sales hour, we have meta-search hour, we have operations hour, accounting hour, HR hour. We have a very progressive roll of shows from a variety of sources on our radio station to catch you up with everything that's hospitality. The Hospitality Channel, the show is always on the free side of it. It is an app on Apple iOS or Google Play. Just look for Hospitality Channel. That is our TV channel as well. And the show is always on the free side. There's a pay gateway that goes to more content. We are going to be opening up a product showcase on the free side as well so that you can get exposure. We're going to try to ask a lot of industry production suppliers and offers to give us their best A-roll as to what they do. Because sometimes you want to reach out to a product, but you don't want to go through the sales process, but you really just want to be exposed to what they're offering beyond their glitzy website perspective and to see what videos they create for themselves that can somehow educate you as to what value proposition they might offer. So we're going to put up a showcase on the free side of the TV channel as well. For any replay of our show, we have what I call an I Love Lucy rerun platform called hospitalitychannel.tv. That has all of our shows, all of our podcasts, excuse me, ranked and searchable by on demand for data broadcast, hosts by name, and also topic. And I'm putting on an AI to it that I'm thinking about using my own voice for it, a voice synth. But I've taken all of the more relevant shows in the past 2 years because, 5 years ago, Vice, maybe some aspects are evergreen, but they're also perspectives of that time since we do the show weekly and have been for 11 years. So most of the content that I brought into the AI chat is from the past 2 years because they're more relevant current strategies. I'm thinking about putting my voice to it, but it's completely interactive. You can ask questions of, did you ever discuss such and such? That will refer specifically to the show and what was said. You can ask me questions about, well, what should I do about such and such? And it'll tell you what the show's advice was in relationship to that topic and we covered it, which after 11 years, we've pretty much hit a lot of the topics, although, like I said, most of the content I'm putting in this from just the past 2 years. So with all of that in mind, should you have any opinions, insights, recommendations, whatever have you, you can reach me at lauren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. I answer each and every email related to the TV channel as well as the radio station and podcasts, audio podcasts as well, tools and tips and all that stuff. If you have any things you want to say audibly, you can go and reach me at hdm.news/talkback. There's an audio platform I have that you can answer the question of the week and or just speak your mind and then tell me whether or not I have permission to refer to you, not refer to you, or simply take your topic or just you want to vent off and tell me a little bit what's going on. So with all of that, my name is Lauren Gray. I thank you for the privilege of your time and I look forward to talking to you all next week.